Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about system crankbait fishing, how to throw the right baits in the right situations. System cranking is amazing if you can get it done. So let's dive into how we do that.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 yo, go, go, go. Hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm buried in my grave. To the system, I don't wanna be a slave. I've been doing shit my way, or the highway, and in the driveway.
The first thing that we want to think about when we're system crankbait fishing. So most guys that are unschooled in the art of crankbait fishing says, you go pick a crankbait that looks pretty good, you tie it on, you go out and you go fishing. This really couldn't be farther from the truth. These baits, while they can be chuck and wind baits, chuck it out there, wind it back, they're actually designed to do specific things in specific situations. So you want to make the most out of these baits while you can in the correct situations that you can to maximize the number of fish that you are catching. So let's get into what I mean by system crankbait fishing. That comes down to inherently what a crankbait is built to do. Number one, a crankbait is built to deflect off of cover and structure, right? When a crankbait is running through the water, right, it's meant to impact its bill on cover as it's going by and then coming up and over or around that cover. Bass are going to tend to react and hit that bait when it impacts cover and the reflection off of. This is a reaction bait 100% of the time. Now, the beauty of crankbait fishing means that what you want to do is you want to select the proper crankbait for the depth of water that you are fishing. Now, I'm going to use the Rapala DT series because it's very easy and visual to understand what I'm talking about, right? So let's say we're on a sloping bank, right? And that bank is sloping down like this. Most people fish a crankbait, they cast up into the shallows, that crankbait knocks its way along until it hits its running depth, and then it's out there in open water. You're simply not going to catch that many fish throwing a crankbait in purely open water. There are better baits to catch fish that are suspended in open water than a crankbait for 98% of the time. So what we want to think about is, one, we want to understand what baits are doing and how deep they're running into the situation that we are fishing. Right? The number one rule of thumb, if I'm fishing a crankbait, any crankbait, I want that bait to be in its maximum depth for 90% of my cast, right? From when I crank it down that first 5%, it should be bumping along the bottom all the way, making impacts through there, kicking and darting around. And then that last 10% of the cast, that last 5% of the cast is climbing back up to the boat, right? So that 5% at the beginning, 5% at the end means that 90% of my cast is an effective cast, right? Now that comes down to choosing what kind of crankbait that you want to throw, right? I fish northern grass lakes a lot. That means that I might be fishing 13 or 14 feet of water, but really I'm looking where those weed lines cut off, and I'm looking for fish suspending in those weed lines. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw a bait like this OG Rococo right here with that square lip on it that's going to run 5 feet, because I know that 5 feet under the surface of the water is about 1 foot to 6 inches over where that grass line is going to be. That is an effective crankbait to throw in that situation. So whenever I go cranking, I have 3 rods usually on my deck to fish northern natural lakes. The first is going to have a square bill of some kind on it, right? Because I know that a square bill in general is going to run 3, 4, 5 feet depending on what line I have on my rod and reel. Now, I want that square bill to hunt and root around right over top of the grass edge, right? But square bills were made with that square bill right there to go through wood cover and rock really well. So I have found that if I high stick a DT6 here, my favorite crankbait of all time, a DT6, and I high stick it, I can effectively fish this bait over top of most weed clumps and edges that I'm targeting 98% of the time, right? The DT 6 is the second bait that I have tied on. Now, this bait is so effective because it has a tight wobble and shimmy. It's silent, it's balsa, it's really buoyant. If I run it down into a weed patch, I simply pause, allow that bait to float free, rip it free, and then off we go. I would say 89% of the bites that I get on a DT6 are when I rip it out of a weed edge. If I get that bait down there to the edge, let it float back and rip it out, it looks like a bait is fleeing. The other 10, 11% of bites that I get from the DT6 are around deeper docks when I throw this up around docks and bang it off of dock pilings on the lakes that I fish. Now, I grew up fishing Lake Cumberland in Kentucky. DT6 wasn't as good because those fish sit deeper and it's deep rock veins and deep rock points. That's where you go to the DT10, right? I pick up the DT10 when I'm later in the fall, I'm earlier in the spring, I'm in the middle of the winter, and I'm grinding this around structure. The DT10 excels around rock and gravel and different kinds of structure that are 10 feet down. So if I'm fishing 8, 10 feet of water, and I know that most of my cover is in that 8 to 10 foot range, I'm throwing the DT10 most of the time. I'm throwing it up there into 7, 8 feet, cranking it down through that 10 foot range. I'm also not casting perpendicular to the bank, I'm casting parallel with the structure most time to make it in the most effective cast for your lure to be in that zone, right? Now, you can run through all of these. I go, most of the time on my setup, I go the DT4 or the Rococo, right, for up shallow. And then if we get a little bit deeper, we've got the DT6. Then we've got the DT8, right, and the DT10. That is system cranking right there in most northern natural grass lakes. Because I know 14, 15 feet of water, those tall weeds are 5 or 6 feet under the water. If I go out to 20 feet of water, they're about 10 or 12 feet down. And then at certain times of the year, the DT 14 or 16 is going to come into play. So the DT 16 right here, when I know it's the hot summertime or the cold, cold wintertime, I'm gonna whip out this bait and I'm going to hit deep humps, structure, flats, in 14, 16, 20 feet of water. And I bring this lure, and you can see the teeth marks on it and the chew on this lure. This will absolutely get pummeled at that time of the year because it is running at the correct depth. But if I tie this on and go fish 6 feet of water, it's not the right tool for the job, right? Just like if I'm fishing 20 feet of water, I don't want to be throwing the Squarebill, right? It's just something that you have to wrap your mind around. It's not the depth of water you're fishing, it's the depth of the structure or the cover that you're fishing, right? If I know if I've got a lot of rock and veins that are in that 10 to 12 foot range and the water is a little off color, I'm gonna put away the silent crankbaits, I'm gonna whip out the loud crankbaits. This wigglewort in the spring and the fall is a killer, right? But it really, really, really shines in the dead of winter on bluff banks, on secondary points where I need to hit that deeper structure of the water column and I need to have a rattle in my bait because the water's off a little bit. I can't tell you how many smallmouth and spotted bass at Lake Cumberland I've caught on a wigglewort on secondary points in the wintertime. I would venture to say it's in the thousands, right? I've burned out so many of these crankbaits. I have a box of old wiggleworts that are broken and tarnished and shredded back at my parents' house in southern Indiana. And I refuse to get rid of them because I caught so many fish on them in the wintertime and the late fall, early spring, where that bait is just a killer. Now, that brings us to the next thing that we want to consider. Do we want sound or do we not, right? 9 times out of 10 on the lakes that I fish, I'm going with the silent bait. Because of pressure, because of water clarity, the silent crankbait tends to do a lot better for me. But if the water clarity is off, then you can go to the rattle bait. Early spring, rattle seems to work better than silent. Fall, silent seems to work better than rattle. The more pressure the fish see, the more I go to the silent bait. The more clarity that there's not in the water, I go to the rattle bait, or the less fishing pressure, the rattle bait, right? If I go up to Minnesota and I'm gonna go crankbaiting, I'm throwing a rattling crankbait 9 out of 10 times because most guys up there don't throw crankbaits, right? You gotta understand where you're at. Cranking is not something a lot of guys do here in this Midwest grass lakes. They just don't, right? It's hard to do if you don't system crank, if you don't really know what you're doing, if you haven't fished crankbaits a lot. It's hard to do sometimes, right? Now, there is another category of crankbait that I've become really successful with, right? And that is the flat-sided crankbait. The flat-sided crankbaits and the Fritz side were really made it wildly popular. It's always been popular in Tennessee, Kentucky, flat-side cranking and guys making garage crankbaits and doing all that stuff. I grew up fishing those baits, right? I grew up fishing Dale Hollow, Cumberland, Laurel River Lake, Green River Lake, all those classic, right, fisheries where the flat-sided crankbait excelled. Now, two flat-sided crankbaits that I love, right? The Bagley Balsa B flat side is a straight up killer, right? In this color scheme right here, when the water clarity is off, you can throw this bait in 4 to 5 feet of water, bang it off of stuff, you're gonna catch fish, guarantee it, right? Same thing with Rapala OG Slim, right? This bait has become a staple in my tackle box because the flat side tight wiggle action, as you can see on the underwater, does an excellent job. The circuit board lips or the clear Lexan skinny lip right there gives it a nice subtle action. This bait will absolutely tear the lips off of fish, but you got to fish them in the correct situation. That's the biggest mistake that I see guys make with crankbaits, right? So system crankbait fishing, you want to fish the crankbait that's going to barely impact the cover where the fish are at, right? If I'm in 14 foot of water and I got 7 feet of weeds, I'm fishing a DT6 or a DT8 so that I'm hitting that cover sporadically, right? If I'm in 20 feet of water trying to hit rock veins, rock big tops of rocks in 15 feet of water, I'm throwing that DT16 and bringing it through there and hitting those, I'm paralleling those rocks, right? System crankbaiting can get you a ton of bites if you do it correctly, but you need to really know what you do and what you're doing. Now, rod selection for crankbait fishing is drastically important. I throw all of my crankbaits on 10-pound fluorocarbon. Always. Just what I've always done because I know what depth that they will run at. Most baits on the market are tested with 10-pound fluorocarbon, so that means that they are true to form when I throw them on 10-pound fluorocarbon. It's just something that I do. Now, as we get into squarebill fishing and heavy cover fishing, that changes things. But what I'm talking about is northern grass lake natural fishing, the way that I'm doing it, or totally open water, rock vein, crankbait fishing, right? 10-pound fluorocarbon, 12-pound, maybe if you're in a lot of cover, a lot of big chunk rock, things like that, but 10-pound is gonna get it done for you, right? I also am a huge believer in speed cranking has taught me this. I throw all of my crankbaits on a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel. Here's a 6-gill hyper ion, and these things are killers. This is a workhorse, right? I grind, it's got the big oversized handle. Crankbaiting, we're going, right? My favorite crankbait rod right now is the Abu Garcia Ike series, right? I've always been a big Mike Iaconelli fan for my whole life, right? I love the way he gets fired up about fishing. Some guys love him, some guys hate him. I love him. I think he does a great job. So this is a 7.3 medium delay, right? And this rod is got a lot of whip in it to let those fish eat those baits. I think two of the coolest moments I've seen guys cranking in big tournaments were the classic on Gunnersville when Randy Howell, you know, had that moment where God spoke to him and he goes over to that bridge and just hammers them for an hour, wins the classic on one spot. The other one in Knoxville when Mike Iaconelli was throwing that DT6 surrounded by all those people on that bridge and just smoking fish left and right, left and right, left and right. Unfortunately, it wasn't his time. He was still a top 10 finish, but that will prove to you right there how much system cranking works, how much your gear is going to matter too. So I like throwing that fast case reel because I like to keep those crankbaits in the working distance. Now, as I'm retrieving those crankbaits, I'm burn, 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 pause, burn, pause, burn, 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 pause. I'm not just straight reeling it back to the boat, right? I am actively working those baits back to the boat with that reel handle and the turns, right? One thing that coming from the south, from that Midwest bite up here to this northern natural lake bite is that it took me a good 2 or 3 years to figure out a decent crankbait bite here. And it's something that I've always kept close to my chest because thinking like I'm gonna go fish a lot of tournaments, I wanna keep this close to the vest. A lot of guys aren't doing that. I realize now that I have kids and now that I'm passionate about teaching anglers to catch fish and stuff, I'm gonna start sharing this stuff, guys. I'm gonna start doing a lot more videos about cranking because it's something that's underserved up here and it's something that a lot of guys aren't doing. And what we want to do is we want to teach you guys what works, what we're throwing, how we're going about it, right? So system crankbaiting is a huge bonus if you can do it. Remember, you want to impact those structures and covers with the lure that is most effective and the most productive depth. You also want to experiment, right? Color-wise, if the water is 55 and below, I'm throwing crawfish colored baits. Red, orange belly, yellow back. The majority of the baits that I'm throwing in that cooler water are crawfish pattern. I really enjoy this color scheme right here from Rapala. I think it's great. Demon is also really good, right? In that cooler to cold water, you know, that is something that I believe in a lot. Black and blue, also in a sleeper pick on a crankbait, right? And then when the water warms up, I'm throwing those more traditional shad color patterns, right? Where you've got the blackback silver, you've got the silver side with the purple. That's Jacob Wheeler's color right there. Your more traditional color. In dirty stained water, solid white on a crankbait will absolutely blow it up. But that bait right there in smallmouth country, when the smallmouth are up shallow, that's a killer too right there. So shad color patterns, when the water's 55 and above, 55 and below, throwing crankbaits in crawfish color patterns. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed our video today. It's a little bit longer of a video. I hope you enjoyed the underwater content. I hope you enjoyed system cranking right there. I hope that you're able to take this material, use it to your advantage, catch some more fish. If you love the video, guys, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Let us know what we can do for you in the comment section, and we will see you out there, guys.